Hello and welcome to this tutorial on data validation and form controls to restrict user input. Before we get stuck into this tutorial, just a quick introduction. My name is Paula Guilfoyle and I am from Dublin in Ireland. A little bit about my background. I am a mother of two. I am a CPA accountant, a bit of an Excel geek and an MVP. In my spare time between being a mother and an accountant and an Excel geek, I also have other interests, and these include Web3 technology, specifically blockchain-based Web3 technology. If you want to contact me about this tutorial at all, you can see my contact details there, my website, my email and my LinkedIn details there on this screen at the moment. The picture I am sharing with you is a picture of a street in Dublin Fair City, the capital of Ireland, where I actually live. So what we're going to talk about is data validation and form controls to restrict user input. Now, why do we actually need to restrict the input of users? Well, basically, spreadsheets are prone to human error. People make mistakes. It's very, very easy. We can get distracted with a phone call or by an email and then just make a clerical error, enter the wrong data into a spreadsheet. Now, when so much critical business information is stored on spreadsheets and in Excel workbooks, there's a huge need for accuracy. By controlling and restricting the user inputs, you can make sure that your data inputs are more accurate and are less prone to errors. There may also be times where you need to limit the user's inputs to specific values or data types. And in this case, you can restrict or limit the choices that the user has by using data validation. And this is going to greatly reduce the chance of human errors or data entry errors on your spreadsheets. Because at the end of the day, data in equals data out. So if you put in rubbish, you're going to get rubbish out. So we're going to look at data validation, and we're going to start with some basics of data validation and then move on to some more custom data or custom validation in your spreadsheets. So I have a simple table of data here, and this is set up as a table format where we have a name and an age. So say we want people signing into a building or something, giving us their name and their age. But what we want to be able to do is restrict the input for the age and restrict it so that the person entering it can only enter something if they're over 18 years of age. So we will use the data validation for this. So I'm going to select these cells that have the age in them at the moment. And from my data ribbon, under data tools, we're going to select data validation. Now this brings up the data validation dialog box, and this dialog box has 3 tabs. It has the settings, the input message and error alert. We're going to go through each of these tabs, starting with the settings. Now the settings is of crucial importance because it's here where you set your criteria for allowing or disallowing the data to be entered. So the criteria, we can allow any value, whole numbers, decimal numbers, list, date, time, text length, or custom. In this case, we're going to enter a whole number. We're going to restrict the user input to only allow whole numbers. Now we're given further options of whether we want it between, not between, equal, greater than, less than, greater than, or equal to is our choice. And we want it to be greater than or equal to 18. So that's the criteria now set for the user to be able to input data with. Next, we can select an input message, and an input message is shown as a little card when you select the actual cell. So let's give this a title of age, and let's put the input message as enter your age. Finally, the last tab is the error alert, and the error alert will allow you set the type of errors on how the user can move forward. So there's 3 styles available. The first style is the stop style, and the stop style is going to stop the user from moving forward until they either cancel or enter a correct value. You also have a warning. Now, a warning will allow a user to select to move on even if there is an error. And finally, you have information which will just give the user a little bit of information that the error is wrong, but they will be able to move forward. So if you really want to control and restrict the user entry, then select the stop style. So we will say warning, and we can say in our error message, you must be over 18, and say OK. So now we have added data validation to these cells. If we can see that the card, because we have one of the cells selected, that the card is available. If we enter in an age, we can see we can change the age. So let's put in something below 18, and we see we get this warning, you must be over 18, and we can only retry, which means put in a different value to be a correct value, or cancel and it leaves it blank. Now, because this is in table format, if we go over and put in a new person, the data validation carries forward because it's in a table. Now, tables have many benefits, and that's kind of outside the scope of this tutorial. But one of the benefits is that it does carry this sort of formatting forward. So we can cancel that. And I am just going to delete some of these cells here, because when I added in that, it shifted some cells on me. So I am going to just delete these 2 cells to bring my spreadsheet back up into line. So that is the basics of data validation. Now, if you want to clear your data validation, go back to data, data validation, select clear all, and that's going to remove the data validation from the cells. You can also use lists for data validation to allow users only pick between specified values that you have predefined in data validation. Let's have a look at an example. I have here, what is your favorite Excel function? And we want the user to be able to pick between a drop-down list of predefined values. So we can use data validation for this. So we go to data, data validation, and this time under our settings, we are going to select list. Now in list, we can put in our list. So let's say XLOOKUP, VLOOKUP, and sort. We just keep it a short list. Now each item must be separated by a comma. So then we say OK, and now we have this drop down. So the user is completely restricted to entering data from the drop down. Now I'm going to go back in there because we hard coded them values in, as in we typed them in, but you can select a list. So you can pick a source. So I have a list typed in here. Now you can create this list in a more dynamic way. If you're using dynamic arrays, you can create a unique and sorted list and have it in here and reference to that list. But I just have a list here in a spreadsheet. So I'm going to say OK. And now all of the values from the list are included in our drop down. So using lists is a great use of data validation. Now let's come down a little bit here, and now we're going to look at some custom validation. Custom validation will allow you set your own rules for data entry. For example, let's say we wanted to set up a new rule that won't allow a duplicate invoice number be entered into a series. So you want to stop duplicates. To do this, we would create our own formula and use this formula in our data validation. Now, if you're familiar with custom formatting, you'll know that when you're creating a formula for custom formatting, it needs to return a true or false result. Well, with data validation, it's the same. You need to return a true or a false result in the formula that you create. So let's see now how we can go about stopping duplicates happening using data validation. So I have selected our cells here that we want the data validation in, but before I select the cells, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the formula outside first. And as with conditional formatting, creating it outside first allows you to test it to make sure that it's working properly, because you can have problems with relative and absolute cell references. And when you create the formula within the conditional formatting or data validation, it can be hard to find the error and fix it. So we're going to create the formula outside and then copy it inside. So what we want to do is make sure there is no duplicate invoice. To do that, we're going to use the COUNTIF function. So the COUNTIF function will count how many times something occurs. So we want to count in our range. So I'm going to start in our D29 cell and go down to D35. Now I'm going to lock that in. And then my criteria is going to be our actual invoice number. So we're going to count how many times the invoice number occurs. What we don't want is we don't want it to occur more than once. And we also want to get a true and false result. So we're going to say equals 1 to get a true result. Now I'm going to just fill this down. And I am going to change this invoice number to 4. And now we have got 2 falses, because it's counted that invoice number twice, so we get 2 falses. So now we have a formula that works. What we can now do is we can copy and paste this formula into our data validation. So I am going to copy the formula. I'm then going to select the cells where I want the data validation to be. In data validation, I am going to select custom. Now we can enter our formula in here. So we can say equals COUNTIF and see if that is count equal to 1. I am going to say OK. And now when I try and enter a duplicate invoice number, it does not allow us enter that duplicate invoice number. So I'm going to cancel there, but I'm going to just go back because I already had that number in. Now, if you have set up your data validation after a number of entries are in and there may already be duplicates and you want to find the duplicates, what you can do is go to data validation and circle invalid data. And that's then going to find the duplicates for you, so that you can uncircle when you've fixed the problem. So we can go in and we can fix the problem. And once we fix the problem, if we go to data validation and clear data validation circles, we can remove any additional circles that have been left over. So we no longer need this formula here because we've added it in. Now if we add in a new line and try and put in a value that's there, it will not allow us. If we put in a new value, we can proceed and we can move on. Now the final thing I am going to show you is how you can use form controls to control the user input. So we're going to combine form controls with data validation. Let's have a look at this sample. I have a form here and we want the user to tick that they are over 18 years of age. They need to then enter their name, and if they don't enter their name, if they haven't ticked the tick box, they can't continue on. So they need to tick the tick box and then they can continue on completing the form as required. So how did I go about this? Well, I used some form controls for this. So let us go to our developer ribbon. Form controls are on the developer ribbon, which you might have to turn on. But once you have the developer ribbon on, if we go to insert, we can select this little tick box and we can draw the tick box wherever we want the tick box to be. So there is our tick box, and I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to edit text, and I'm just going to remove that text from there. Now, the reason I am removing the text from there is because you don't have the formatting options on text as you do if you have it as normal text in Excel. So that is our text removed. So then we can just come over into a cell and we can put in I am over 18 years old as separate text. So then we can take our tick box and we can position our tick box a little bit closer to our text. And then we can select all of these cells here and we can fill them in a grey colour and change the writing to bold and white and maybe make it a little bit bigger. And that is how I have created this little button up here. So we need to then format our form control. So I am going to right click and say format control. So we're going to give it the option to be mixed. So it starts off as not ticked and people can then check or uncheck it. And I am going to link this to cell F3. So this will now be linked to F3. Now we see behind there in F3. So I'm going to move this tick box for the moment. We can see in F3 we now have an NA. If we click on our tick box, we get a false when it's not ticked and a true when it is clicked. So now we can use this true or this false to create our data validation to allow people use the list or not use the list. So let us come down here. We will say name. And from my home ribbon, I like to use styles for my input cell. And I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger to put in the name. So this is the cell that we are going to restrict the user input, and it's going to be based on whether this is true or false. So if we go to our data ribbon, if we go to data validation, and we are going to select custom, and our formula is going to be equal to F3. So once F3 is true, we can put in a name. But if F3 is false, we're not going to be able to put in our name. Now you'll see up here, you can't see this true or this false. So how did I do this? Well, I used a custom formatting trick. So I pressed Control and 1 to get it into our formatting. And in custom, in general, I'm going to type in 3 semicolons. Now what 3 semicolons will do is basically hide the values from the cell so you can't see them. But you can see up here in the formula bar there's still something there. You just can't see it. So now we can reposition our little form control and drag it back up into our tick box. And now it won't work because it's not ticked, so I will cancel. I'll tick that I'm over 18, and now I can continue on with the form. And that's how you can use form controls along with data validation to restrict the inputs for this tutorial. I do hope that you found this tutorial on data validation and form controls to be of value. If you need to contact me or have any questions on it, you can find my contact details on the screen now. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye now.